Can the youthful exuberance of Adam Gase do it again? Wow. Miami Dolphins, 10-6 last year, one of the surprises in the NFL. They returned 9 starters on offense, 10 on defense. We'll see what they can do this year. So the second preview of our 2017 NFL preview, we're talking Dolphins right now. And we got Brendel Albert back on the show. How's it going?
Good, guys. Ready to talk about the fish today.
Yeah. All right, so we just had a discussion, which was interesting because I was talking about, Gase and how I think he's a genius and offensive mastermind, and then you were kind of saying, coaching isn't as big of a deal as you might think it is.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think the head coaching, the name of the head coach means a little less. I am more about who is your coordinators and who are your positional coaches. I think that is a little more stock in that than your head coach. Because your head coach typically, he's involved in your game planning and things like that, but it's usually towards the end of the day. Your coordinators, your actual position coaches, those are the guys handling the day-to-day, helping players improve, and really ensuring that you have a good game plan with the head coach kind of being the final say. So at least in the NFL, with the way that these guys are practicing so long, they're spending so much time with their position coaches that I kind of put more stock into them than saying, oh, well, this team got a new head coach, so that means they're going to be successful. Not always. I don't think that always happens, except when you get situations like Bill Belichick where, he is – look at his staff. His staff has all been together for so long, and even when a guy like, McDaniels leaves, takes a head coaching job, and he comes back, he's successful again because he's part of a good staff.
It's interesting you make that point. Just to give a quick Eagles reference, when you think of Doug Peterson, I hate the coach, but he's got a good staff around him. Jim Schwartz on the defensive side of the ball. But when you looked at Chip Kelly, his staff's always stunk, like the worst, literally, in the NFL. Billy Davis was his defensive coordinator here in Philly. So, that's an interesting point you make there, and I don't necessarily disagree with it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I like to look back, and I'll use, we talked about this on a show we did 2 shows ago now, a 2000 Baltimore Ravens team. Brian Billick was the head coach. Brian Billick came from being the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings when the Vikings had Dante Culpepper, Randy Moss, Chris Carter, all those, and they were an offensive juggernaut. He came to Baltimore to be that offensive mind. Well, on the defensive side, he had Rex Ryan. He had oh my gosh, I can't think of his name, head coach of the Browns, Marvin Lewis. And then he also had, and the head coach, Jack Del Rio. Mm-hmm. So on his defensive side, he had 3 guys who were coaching positions who are not all NFL head coaches. So I use this as an example of, Brian Billick, he obviously did enough to win a Super Bowl, and great for him. But he had 3 coaches on the defensive side who were good enough that other 32 jobs in the NFL said, yeah, we're going to take 3 of these guys. And that's pretty impressive to me. So I think there's a little more stock in the position coach than necessarily your head coach overall.
Now, I will give him this. The reclamation project of Ryan Tannehill, another successful reclamation project for Adam Gase. You look at Ryan Tannehill's quarterback rating, 93.5, best of his career, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. So he turns, Peyton Manning did a great job with him. Does it really count with Peyton? Who knows? But Jay Cutler did a great job with him, and now it's happening with Tannehill in Miami. So the history, it's continuing with Gase and quarterbacks. He's a quarterback whisperer.
Yeah, certainly. When you look at situations like that, that obviously kind of matters a tremendous amount, especially the quarterback position. In the end of the day, you just can't win in the NFL in our modern time without having a good quarterback. So certainly that does matter. Now, the one thing that always is interesting, and as someone in my position who I have a background of training and working with quarterbacks, there are thousands of ways to skin a cat. There's thousands of different terminologies of ways to kind of train different quarterbacks. Some work, some don't. Some work for this student athlete, some don't work for that student athlete. So the problem you sometimes get a rise in is when you get a head coach who's a quarterback guy, then you bring in your offensive coordinator, then you bring in your quarterback coach. All 3 of them better be singing the same music and better be able to use the same terminology and the same way to break down a quarterback. Otherwise, your quarterback, he's going to get pulled in 3 different directions. One guy, maybe he's really heavy into footwork. Another guy, he's really big into release. Another guy, maybe he's really big into, hip and knee placement. So you got to make sure that all three of these guys are in the same place. And that's what happens, unfortunately, a lot of times. I mean, look at Alex Smith. I mean, he went year after year after year after year under new quarterbacks where I'm sure he was being told, hey, you're actually good at this, but you're bad at that. And the next year it was the exact opposite. So I think that's important that we always kind of keep in mind when we're looking at, oh, well, this coach is a quarterback guru, so that automatically means that our guys can be a good quarterback. Not necessarily.
Yeah. Now, while I think he did pretty good overall, Tannehill, the complaints out of Miami, not good on third down, not efficient in the red zone, and not good in the fourth quarter. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I don't think I don't think any of those things are really out of the norm. But I think the thing I'll say about Tannehill is what you're paying him and where he's being paid is all very, very appropriate. I mean, he's currently paid as the 11th highest paid quarterback. And, I mean, if we sat here and we actually thought about quarterbacks that were ahead of him, let me kind of rattle off the list for you guys. And I have two screens, so don't think I'm being rude.
Oh, I've got all of the guys ranked ahead of him.
So here's what we got. We have Derek Carr, Andrew Luck, Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan. Dalton is currently paid more to him, which that one I don't love. Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers. Those are the guys who are paid ahead of him. The only guys who I personally think obviously are more talented than him and are paid below him is Brady. Now, Brady takes a pay cut every year, so that's not really a great situation. Bradford, but he's a 2018 free agent, so he's going to get paid more than him very soon. And then we have Drew Brees, 2018 free agent. He's going to get paid more than him very soon. And then the rest of the guys are guys on rookie contracts like Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Mariota, Kirk Cousins, etc. So really, ultimately, when we look back in a year from now, Tannehill is going to be a middle of the pack paid quarterback. I think that's perfect. I think that's completely fair for him. So I like Tannehill personally.
I got him ranked as the 22nd quarterback. He's actually right before Tyrod Taylor. I had Tyrod Taylor at 23. So right below him, Alex Smith at 20, Joe Flacco 21, Alex Smith at 20, Eli Manning 19, Carson Palmer. So that's kind of where I have him.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think if you were to poll NFL GMs today and you would say, hey, for a 1 year, would you want Flacco or Tannehill? I think there's a very real debate there. Same thing with Carson Palmer. But then if you say, hey, but for moving your franchise moving forward, I think all of them are going to say, yeah, we'll take Tannehill over an older Flacco, over a much older Carson Palmer, probably even more than a much older Eli Manning even.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the running backs. Jay Ajayi, great second year there in Miami, 1,272 rushing yards. He went to the Pro Bowl. He was outstanding. 3 200-yard games as well. Jay Ajayi was awesome.
Yeah, Jay Ajayi had a pretty dirty year, second year in the NFL. And you got to remember, his first year, there were a lot of games he was just healthy and active scratches.
Yeah.
The Dolphins just said, no, we're good. We're just going to scratch you. So he obviously came shot out of a cannon. So my question for Jay Ajayi, is he a shooting star? Is he going to be one of those guys that we're saying, wow, look at that season and everything else kind of faltered by the wayside? Let me give you a couple things I really liked about him. I'm a big Pro Football Focus. They gave him an 87.5 grade this year, which marked him as the fourth best back in the NFL. Okay. He also led the NFL in missed tackles forced per attempt. So meaning he had a guy had him square to rights and he missed it. He made a missed tackle, and yards after contact per attempt. Those are awesome statistics. Here's my trade-off. That's not two statistics that you statistically can continue to duplicate. It's not easy to make that a year after year thing unless you're Barry Sanders. The Dolphins here, they're one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. They're probably in the top or bottom 10. I'd probably say they're between 20 and 30. They're not a great offensive line. Now, the trade-off, Jay Ajayi is going to get the ball probably 300 times this season between PPR and also in actual rushing attempts. So as far as a fantasy back, he could be someone who could still be a fantasy back 1 or a really, really good fantasy back number 2 for your team. But I think if you go in with the expectations that he's going to be a top 4 rusher in the NFL this season, I think that's just unrealistic. I think he's going to take a slide down. I think he'll be closer to 10, still be certainly a good back, but I think he's going to be a good back mostly because he's going to get the rock handed to him a lot, not because his offensive line's very good.
Yeah, I got him ranked as the 6th back right now, and offensive line to basically. All right, so I got them at 22nd. So you're right, between 20 and 30. So that's about right there. Yeah, I mean he runs very physical. He runs angry. I mean I love that about him. But a physical style like that, how many years is he really going to last in the NFL? You know.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's one of those things. I think about a guy like Jamal Lewis. You know, I mean, his body just completely destroyed. I mean, if anyone ever sees and has the opportunity to see Jerome Bettis in public, he can barely walk. I mean, his body is just mincemeat. The Dolphins is one of those offensive line. I mean, they have Jaquan James as the right tackle, and then they have, obviously they went and drafted Tunsil, who's between guard and tackle. So you have 2 good guys there. Pouncey hasn't been able to stay healthy, and they have 2 of the worst guards in the NFL. Every year their guards are just completely getting destroyed by interior pressure. And I don't care who you are as a quarterback. If you can't step into a throw, you can't be successful. So I was really disappointed in the Dolphins when they didn't go out and draft a guy like Dan Freeney out of Indiana as a guard situation. You know, obviously the Chargers, they did a great job of drafting their guards this year in the NFL draft. But I really the Dolphins took a big miss by not getting a guard because that's something they really desperately need in Miami.
All right, so some of the other backs, we talked about the Bills and how they don't really have depth at running back, but I think the Dolphins have it. Kenyan Drake, and I love Damien Williams and his versatility out of the backfield, catching passes, really good blocker as well. So I like the trio that they got in South Beach.
Yeah, I think, for them, they're not necessarily going to be a running back by committee, which is pretty rare in 2017 in the NFL. They're going to force the ball down Ajayi's throat.
Yep.
But they have 2 serviceable backs out there, which is nice too. So, it's one of those things when we think about fantasy-wise, you obviously want to try to avoid the guy who's going to be a running back by committee. So Ajayi gets a big bump there. The minus is his offensive line is pretty terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. I mean, now I think this statistic is telling. So I talked about the 3 200-yard rushing games, but he also had 9 where he had 59 yards or fewer. And I don't think that's really his fault. I think that's the line, really.
Oh, absolutely, Adrian. I mean, that's why I love this stat of he led the NFL in missed tackles by attempt, which on the surface, everyone's like, oh, that's great. But then when you think about it, it's like, but someone should be blocking those guys. Like that's really what we're saying here. Someone should have that guy blocked. He shouldn't have to make someone miss. The only guy he really should make miss is maybe an outside backer on an angle or like the single high safety. You shouldn't have to make the defensive tackle or the middle backer miss. That tells me your centers and your guards aren't working your way up.
Yeah, we'll get into that offensive line in a second, but we're going to go to wide receivers now. So we all know about Jarvis Landry's awesomeness, 94 receptions, 1,136 yards, great after the catch. And then you got the over-the-top threat, Kenny Stills. So let's talk about the wideouts. I mean, it's a solid group. DeVante Parker, hopefully he can emerge a little bit more this year. I'm also looking at Leonte Carroo. That was a guy I liked out of Rutgers, but really quiet rookie year. We'll see what he can do in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, what the Finns got, if their receiving core is a good mix, obviously they have a Pro Bowl guy, right there with the juice and Jarvis Landry. So that's always a nice kind of thing. You say, okay, we got one Pro Bowler there, and he's going to get us anywhere from 70 to 100 receptions a year. That's a lock. Okay, great. So now we just now kind of sprinkle it around. So, Kenny Stills has always been a guy in the slot. He's always been able to be your I don't want to say your gadget guy, but he's always been able to do a little more of your route running stuff. Jarvis Landry working more of the shallow dig, the shallow quick game stuff, which is really what Tannehill excels in, is quick 3-step drops, get the ball out of his hands. And then you have DeVante Parker, where he's really supposed to be the big threat, the red zone threat. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when they talk about the struggles of Ryan Tannehill in the red zone, it's because he doesn't really have a big body. So DeVante Parker, he's supposed to be that. Really, they went out and they traded for Julius Thomas in the tight end, so he's supposed to be another big body to help them in the red zone. DeVante Parker, I'm going to give you some more really good stats I had here. He came in with an 81 grade in the Pro Football Focus, which ranked him as the 27th best receiver in the NFL, which on the surface says, damn, that's a really good number 2 in the NFL, which it is. Now, here's the problem, okay? In 5 games last season, he had less than 2 receptions. That's really bad for a number 2 receiver in the NFL. So DeVante Parker, yes, every year he has improved. I will say that. But if he doesn't drastically improve again, he's going to be one of those guys not seeing his 5th-year option pulled in a year from now. So Parker is a guy, I think he's a little bit on the hot seat there. Has all the tools to develop, and I think he could be a nice little late-round draft pick in your fantasy team too.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far to say he's been as disappointing as, say, like Sammy Watkins, for instance. Like, I don't think it's that drastic. Well, actually, I didn't say that right. But Parker's been a guy that's also been hurt too, and he struggled with injuries. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. But yeah, he's got to step it up, and I like that wide receiving core overall. And you mentioned Julius Thomas and how he's going to help in the red zone, and I talked about Tannehill and his red zone struggles. So no more excuses there. That's for sure.
Oh, big time. I mean, look, Tannehill's gotten a lot of weapons around him. He's got more weapons around him than a lot of people realize, and he's got more weapons around him than a lot of NFL teams do.
It's a very underrated crew there in Miami. It really is.
It really is. Now, that said, to me, if you have bad interior pressure like the Dolphins continuously have, nothing's going to be successful. I mean, the worst place to get pressure for a quarterback is right up the gut. The worst place to get pressure for a running back is right up the gut because you can't pull your guards. You can't really do a lot of stuff. So that was my big minus. I do like the Cliff Harris draft pick for the Dolphins. I think he is going to be a nice defensive end, but I would have much rather seen the Dolphins invest early like they did the last 2 years in the offensive line.
Yeah, and let's talk about that offensive line right now. Now, in terms of sacks allowed, they only allowed 30, which was the 10th fewest in the league. So people might look at that number, oh, okay, maybe it's not so bad. But Tannehill gets rid of the ball so quick, I think that's part of the reason why it's so low.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity to work with Tannehill when I was down at IMG Academy. First off, he's a rock star guy, so I'm a little biased. I think he's one of my favorite people I've worked with. But, yeah, I mean, he's got an awesome quick release. He's one of those people that you got to remember he was majority in college a receiver. Didn't play a lot of quarterback until he was an upperclassman. But good release. Again, he's really good in the 3-step game. That said, I want to see him develop more into a vertical passer, but you can't if you don't have time to throw the ball deep. So, I like Tannehill. I think he's a top 16 guy. I think his future, he probably could be as good as like a 10th best guy in the NFL. He's never going to be a top 5 guy in the NFL, though.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Laremy Tunsil in the year 2. So he played guard last year. I would guess that he's going to take the place of Brandon Albert now at left tackle. So we'll see what he can do in year 2. You look at the starters at guard. I mean, you said it. Like it's terrible. Anthony Steen and Jermon Bushrod. Ew, that's awful. And if Mike Pouncey can't stay healthy, I mean, you talked about pressure up the middle. Tannehill's going to be mincemeat.
Yeah, Jerome Bushrod was one of the worst guards in the NFL last year. I mean, he was just getting – every time you see run pressure, just watch Bushrod because his eyes are in the backfield because he's like, oh, shit, there goes another guy I didn't block. It's just bad there in Miami in the inside. So, I mean, I don't think Brandon Albert was ever going to be a stud left tackle, but that was another big kind of loss for the Dolphins in free agency because it at least allowed Tunsil – to come in and plug a guard spot up for you so you could kind of have a little more security inside. But, I mean, Tunsil's future, he was drafted as left tackle. That's what he's going to be. The Dolphins just really didn't do anything to improve the inside. And, as you said it, Adrian, Pouncey's hurt. I mean, he's one of those guys where he's not going to play 16 games a season. He'd be lucky if he plays 12 kind of thing.
Played 5 last year. That was it.
Yeah.
So he's always hurt. Like both of them, Pouncey's are always hurt. Marquise, too. What are their parents feeding those boys?
Something in the water, I guess.
All right, let's move on to the defensive line. Now, I like the addition of William Hayes at defensive end. I always think he's been kind of lost in the shuffle in St. Louis/LA now. So I always thought he was pretty good. They still got Ndamukong. Cam Wake still producing despite his age. So I don't know what he did last year in terms of sacks, but I know he was producing. So that's great to see because they moved from the 3-4 to the 4-3. and he made a seamless transition, still bends the edge with the best of them. So what are your thoughts on D-line?
Yeah, so the D-line, actually, they lost 2 defensive ends in Mario Williams and Dion Jordan. And if Eagles fans remember,
Dion Jordan.
that was the name that was really, really getting pushed by Chip Kelly, too, to get pulled in the trade. Okay, so good work, Chip. Every time you get a chance to bring up Chip Kelly, you got to throw it in there, right? So, I mean, and the shame of it all is Dion Jordan was one of those guys where he probably would have been more successful in a 4-3 than a 3-4. I mean, that's probably where he would have been more fit. So, as you said, William Hayes, who doesn't believe in dinosaurs, which is still one of my favorite things to see on Hard Knocks, is when he's debating random people that dinosaurs never existed. He's gonna be a right defensive end starter in the mix with Cliff Harris. Cliff Harris is one of those guys they drafted high. I like Cliff Harris because he has phenomenal speed, but he doesn't really have a ton of pass moves. He pretty much won almost exclusively off speed, doesn't really have a lot of physicality in his game as of yet. And to be fair, most edge rushers coming off their NFL career as far as a rookie, those guys don't really have a lot of pass rush moves, so he's one of those guys who needs to develop. So bringing in a vet like William Hayes is great. I would expect to see William Hayes playing a lot of first and second down and then seeing him sub out and get Cliff Harris in on a third down situation. I think that's a very nice way for Hayes to kind of grow into his role. Sue obviously is still a stud there. Defensive line, good, not great. I'd probably say middle of the pack in the NFL.
Yeah, let's talk about Charles Harris a little bit more because we talked about it during the draft and all of our preview stuff, how he was really a great fit for a 3-4, but he's in a situation where he's in a 4-3. So do you think he's going to be successful?
Not initially. And when I say that, I think fair statistics for him to have this season, since I'm gonna say he's probably gonna be a rotation guy with William Hayes, and that's the right way to play it.
Yep.
Realistically for him, I think he's probably gonna have 30 tackles and I'll say 6.5 sacks, which as a rookie is fine. I mean, that's really what you want.
6.5 sacks.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair number to have. Now, obviously, if he gets down, you look at the flip side. We looked at a guy on our last show, talked about the build of Shaq Lawson. Shaq Lawson was a guy who only had 2 sacks last year. Mm-hmm. So, as long as I would say, as long as, Cliff Harris is in that 5 to 8 sacks range, he's developing. If we get anything more than 8 sacks, we're looking at a stud in the draft. But I think 5 to 8 sacks is a realistic fit for him.
Do you like Ndamukong still? Sacks declined to 5 last year, but overall, I'd say he's still the best player on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly defensively. He's certainly still the best defensive threat you have. And again, when you're in a division with Brady, you have to be able to get pressure up the gut to make Brady unsuccessful. So Sue is a big need for the Dolphins to, kind of come back to that 2014 statistics and not what it was last year. I don't think it's realistic that he's going to be a 12-plus sack guy ever again in his career. But I think if he can get close to 10, Dolphins are in a really good spot.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to linebackers. Our boy Kiko Alonso, Mr. Belly Shirt himself, bounced back. Actually had a pretty good year in South Beach. What do you think about this crew? They signed Lawrence Timmons as well, correct, at middle linebacker. So we'll see how this unit does.
Yeah, I mean they bring in Timmons, which allows Kiko to go to that will side, probably play a little more in the dropping.
He's not a middle line. He's not. He's too small.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Kiko's ability is to read the play in space, play in pass coverage, get to the ball, force fumbles. So for Kiko to go to the will, I think that kind of is nice. It complements his skill. It also kind of takes a little bit of the physical pounding away off of him, of having to take on pulling guards and reach blocks and things like that. So he's going to face more tight ends and maybe more tackles where he might have a better angle to take those blocks on half a body. So I like Kiko a lot. I think Kiko is one of those guys where he does have the potential to be a year in and year out, close to 100 tackle, Pro Bowl level guy. I'm a big Kiko fan. Problem is the rest of the linebacker crew is just old age and question marks. I mean, there's nothing else really there, which puts, unfortunately, more pressure than on guys like Cliff Harris to develop early and then guys like Cameron Wake to continue to get sacked so they don't have to blitz guys like Kiko, and they can let him play in space.
You're a Kiko Alonso fan. We just got 3 dislikes on the video.
I figured that was going to happen, Now, here's the thing. I am still a LaShawn McCoy fan more than Kiko Alonso, so let's put it that way.
There you go. All right, so the Dolphins ranked, I believe, 30th in rush defense last year. And you get in Timmons, so you bring in Timmons now to help at middle linebacker. I mean, sure, yeah, he is older, but I would think that this is going to help in the run defense.
Big time. Yeah, I mean, big time. You get a vet, a guy who's able to work B gap to B gap. That's really all you'll ever expect of him. He'll certainly be a liability in situations where you get option routes from a running back or a tight end. He'll certainly be a liability there. But exactly like you said, Adrian, you're not necessarily bringing him in to really stop the pass. You're in there to kind of let his body take the pounding and let Kiko do the majority of the pass stuff.
Yeah, 30th against the run, 140.4 yards per game last year. So that was not good at all. Not good at all. Raekwon McMillan, they drafted him. Is he going to be the other starter, you think, at outside linebacker?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly will be. But I think it's mostly just because the rest of the Dolphins' options there are NFL journeymen. It'll be a turnstile on the other side. I mean, really, Timmons is the only guy. He's going to walk in as a starter mostly because of experience, and he's going to be the wise old vet, and that's a great person for Kiko to have around him. But Kiko's the really only guy there who's a certified starter in the 2017 NFL season for the Miami Dolphins.
Now, another guy that we hate in Philadelphia had another solid season in Miami as well, and that's Byron Maxwell. So what are your thoughts on him and his season in Miami? Now, I'm not going to lie. I was one of the guys that was like, Maxwell didn't play as bad as everyone thought in Philly. And then he kind of, justified, my reasoning last year with how he played. I thought he was good.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. When corner is the position that it frustrates the hell out of me probably more than anyone else when they don't, lock down the number one receiver. Like, the hardest thing to do in any football is play man coverage. And now you're going to ask them to play man coverage against guys like Odell Beckham and guys like Des Bryant 4 games this season and just expect him to just lock him down right away. It's just not going to happen. It's tough, especially when you get someone coming from a system like Seattle, where they have the best center field safety over the top at all times in Earl Thomas. They're able to be – Maxwell and other guys are able to be a little more aggressive. So I don't want to knock Byron Maxwell, but I think when he came to Philly, there was this unfair preconceived notion that he would just lock everything down. And I think that was just unfair for him.
It's the way I saw the Maxwell situation, it was kind of like the Reddick thing. Like, sure, yeah, they definitely overpaid for Byron Maxwell, but it was such a need to get a cornerback that they were willing to overpay and willing to do that. And, I never thought Byron Maxwell was going to be a top 10 cornerback in the NFL. But the way he got paid, that's the way he got paid, and that's why the expectations were so high. But I didn't really expect, greatness out of him because of what you just said. I mean, great situation there in Seattle. Now let's talk about some of these other guys that nobody knows who these guys are, but they're actually kind of okay. Xavier Howard was a rookie last year. You got Tony Lippett, Bobby McCain. Now I like Rashad Jones a lot. Mm-hmm. I have him ranked as my 5th ranked safety, I believe. If you want to talk about underrated players in the league, I mean, this guy might be on the top of the list.
No doubt. No doubt, Adrian. He especially at the strong safety position. He's top 5 best strong safeties in the league. You probably could argue he's one of the top 10 best total safeties in the NFL, and I wouldn't really put up too much.
Number 5.
Yeah, I mean, he's a stud. He's one of those people that a lot of people don't know about. The great thing what the Dolphins did a lot last year is they were able to spin him down to the side opposite of Kiko, so they were able to still have 2 of their better athletes splitting the field in half, which was a really nice thing. Nate Allen, again, he's an NFL journeyman. I mean, he's one of those guys that you bring him in and you know what you're getting. Yeah. I mean, like, you're just like, okay, all right,
no, you know what you're getting. Just don't take him to what was the place? Oh fuck! I forgot off the top of my head. The lobster incident.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
talking.
Yeah.
It happened.
That did happen. Yeah. I mean, but like you bring him in and you just like kind of know you're like, all right, well, we don't have anything really great in our roster. This guy's out there. We'll bring him in. He'll do enough. He'll be deeper than the deepest, and he won't necessarily do a terrible job at it. But he's just not an elite athlete anymore, and that's fine. I mean, the free safety position is something that's really difficult. Now, I do like TJ McDonald, another one of those.
Bring his name up. He is suspended for the first 8 games, but he's always been really good.
I mean, you don't have a lot of guys in the NFL that can walk around at 6 foot 220 and run under the 4.5 mark, and he's one of those guys where his body and his speed is really exactly what the NFL needs for a defense in 2017 when we're seeing these bigger and these faster tight ends, coming out. Especially look at this year's draft. I mean, we had so many of those tight ends in those situations. So I like TJ McDonald. Obviously, his suspension is a big blow for them. But he's another one of those guys in nickel and dime situations. You can bring him down and you can kick out Lawrence Timmons to say, hey, go sit on the bench here for a second. We'll let TJ McDonald play that Sam backer position where he's still physical enough to stop a draw or a screen game, but he's certainly athletic enough to still play in coverage and in space. So he's a nice package guy that Dolphins brought in. I did like that signing.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into who's on the hot seat. We'll talk a little underrated players, all that good stuff. Who is on the hot seat in Miami?
Well, the guy I have on my hot seat is DeVante Parker.
Yeah, that's my guy. So, okay.
And I have him on my hot seat just because I don't know if he is a surefire getting his fifth-year option picked up at this point. He's got to continue to develop, down the stretch. Obviously, if you had asked me this question a year ago, I says Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, the Dolphins invested him in a contract. So now DeVante Parker has to be that guy to say, okay, we've invested in our quarterback. We've invested in our opposite receiver. We brought in another tight end. We've established a good starting left tackle and a solid right tackle. Guards, center situation, we need to grow. We got a good running back. You're the only one. You're the only one in this offense that there's a little bit of a big question mark around. So DeVante Parker, he's my hot seat guy from Miami.
I think Mike Pouncey could be potentially another one too. I mean, especially if he's not healthy again. Like, what are you supposed to do with him if he's playing 5 games again?
Yeah, I mean, I would say DeVante Parker is in a hot seat for Miami. I would say Pouncey, he's in the hot seat for his NFL starting career.
There you go. It's a good point. Underrated players, I mean, we just talked about Rashad Jones, so he's the big one there. I guess we could do schedule predictions right now. You have them going at 10-6 again, so that's interesting. Do you have them making the postseason?
Right there in that wild card hunt. They're going to be one of those teams fighting with the Ravens, the Bengals, Steelers, the Chiefs, Broncos. I mean, there's a lot of teams right there that are all fighting for that wild card situation. So 10-6. Now, the tough thing is they got a tough draw. We talked about this in the Bills show with their division opponents, getting the AFC West, getting the NFC South, and getting the AFC North. Those are 3 tough divisions there. So that's tough for the Dolphins to not really get a ton of wins out of division that are gimme games. You still get the Jets, 2 gimme games right there. The Bills, you'd like to think you're going to get 2 right there. 10-6, I think, is fair. They certainly don't have enough to overtake a team like the Patriots, and they didn't do enough on the offensive line. And when you play teams like Bengals, like the Ravens, like the Steelers, like the Chiefs, like the Broncos, they're going to get mean and nasty in the trenches, and that's where a big, big minus. Miami's going to lose majority of those matchups. So that's why I have the Dolphins, the 10-6 team, on the fringe of a wild card, but I could see them even dropping as low as 7 or 6 wins if they really don't protect the quarterback.
Yeah, I got 8 wins, and it's because of the schedule. I mean, this schedule is brutal, just like we talked about with the Bills. Now, the Patriots, when we get to them, they can certainly handle the schedule. They're the best team in the NFL. But the Dolphins, I got 8-8. But I'm curious to see how they do in year 2. I mean, you got high expectations now, so we'll see if they can kind of live up to them. The complete opposite last year, when no one expected anything from the Dolphins. If I remember correctly, I had them ranked 30th out of 32 teams, and they went and made the playoffs. I kept waiting for them to falter, and they never did. It was pretty unbelievable.
Now, to be fair, Adrian, when you were doing those rankings, Ajayi was a no one to you. I mean,
I'm trying to remember how. I mean, Ajayi was great against the Eagles. So, I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's something. And now I definitely didn't have him ranked that high. I mean, I have him as a 6th-ranked running back right now. But last year I probably had him, an average guy. An average guy for me is a 7.3. So that's probably where I had him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's a big reason why we saw such a huge jump in the Dolphins. I mean, when you go from having a running back that was inactive the next season being the 4th leading rusher, I think that's fair that everyone can say we didn't see this coming. That's completely a fair assessment. Yeah, I mean, a 8-win team to 10-win team, that's fair for the Dolphins.
Yeah. All right. Breakout player, potentially. Do you have anybody on your list? Anybody you can think of?
I mean, I would say
that question.
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess you could also say he is a hot seat, but he also could be a breakout player in DeVante Parker. He very much could be a guy, but I think that there's so much stability in what Miami has, and I don't mean stability as in good. I mean, I think we know what everything is there. I think the only player who's a little bit of a question mark that I could even say, I didn't see that coming, would be DeVante Parker or maybe Xavier Howard as the opposite corner. If he comes out and just has a light-out year, that's possible. But those are the only guys I would really say are potential breakout stars, let's say.
I'll go with Carroo. I mean, we'll see. He had 3 catches last year, so he did nothing. I like Carroo coming out. I said that earlier in the video. He's like this physically imposing specimen. But we'll see if he can break through this year. So that'll be my guy. All right. Any final thoughts before we head out?
That's it, guys. We got 2 teams done. We got 30 left. We're going to cover them all. So some of you guys will be like, well, why are you talking about the Browns? Because somehow they're still in the NFL and we have to talk about them. That's the end of the day, all right? So we'll talk about all 32 teams. Keep listening, and eventually we'll get to your birds. Don't worry about it.
We're going to do the birds last. We're going to do it last. So you're going to have to wait.
Build suspense.
Yep, exactly. So with that being said, that is Brendan Albert. I am Adrian Fedke. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And yes, we are doing all 32 teams because I saw somebody in the comments on our last show was complaining that we're talking about the Bills. There are 32 teams in the NFL. All right, you don't have to watch every video we do. Okay? That's all that needs to be said. All right, we're out. Deuces.
Later.